The quiet man in seat 3A the airplane hummed softly as passengers boarded one by one, dragging their carry-ons and glancing at seat numbers. It was a standard domestic flight, nothing special. The air was dry. The flight attendants were polite, but tired, and overhead bins filled quickly. In the middle of it all, a man in a black hoodie, jeans, and a worn leather backpack quietly took his seat in 3A near the window. His head was down, hair brushing his shoulders. He didn't ask for attention. He never did. Keanu Reeves was not flying private today. He'd insisted on flying commercial for a personal reason no one around him knew. Even the airline didn't know who he was, at least not the new team at the gate who had rotated in last month. There were no special requests, no first-class upgrade. He just wanted one thing: peace. But peace is rarely granted when pride walks the aisles in a uniform. A stewardess in her mid-30s with neatly clipped blonde hair and a headset pressed to her ear walked up to him. She held a tablet in her hand. Her name tag said, Melissa. "Sir," she said sharply, "you're in business class, but you didn't request Wi-Fi access in advance. You'll need to purchase it through the app. It's not complimentary unless you're part of our executive rewards program." Keanu looked up, his expression calm. He smiled slightly and replied, "Oh, okay. I thought it was standard in business. No problem." Melissa raised an eyebrow. She didn't recognize him. Or maybe she did, but some people choose to pretend. They don't when they want power over someone else. "As I said, only for executive reward members. If you don't have that, you'll need to pay." "Sure," he said gently, reaching into his backpack. His phone was there, but no signal. The Wi-Fi onboarding screen wouldn't load. "The portal isn't working," he said, not with complaint, but like he was explaining the weather. Melissa sighed. "Sir, the instructions are clear. You must pay before connecting. If you're having trouble, that's a tech issue. We can't do anything." He nodded and placed his phone back in the bag. "Okay, I'll just read something." But Melissa didn't walk away. She lingered as if expecting him to press further. When he didn't, her tone changed. "Just letting you know, we're not here to give out free upgrades or tech support." Several passengers nearby looked up. The older man in 3B turned slightly, curious now. The woman across the aisle clutched her purse tighter. No one said anything, but everyone felt it. That tension when someone in power flexes it over someone who doesn't fight back. Keanu didn't react. "Thank you for letting me know." She left. 15 minutes later, as the plane taxied toward the runway, the captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're number 2 for takeoff. Please fasten your seatbelts. Today's flight time is 1 hour and 42 minutes. Thank you for flying with us." Keanu looked out the window at the sun falling behind a curtain of clouds. His fingers tapped lightly on the tray table. He looked thoughtful, not angry, not shaken, just thoughtful. He wasn't upset about the Wi-Fi. It wasn't the internet. It wasn't even Melissa's tone. It was what the small moment represented, the quiet cruelty of power misused, the assumption that kindness was weakness, the performance of superiority in front of others. What no one on the flight knew, not even the pilot, was that Keanu Reeves wasn't flying for leisure. He had invested in aviation for years. He had recently partnered with a company that was silently auditing several airlines for customer treatment, operational ethics, and crew behavior. A pilot program, quite literally. This flight was being watched. At that moment, in a monitoring office several hundred miles away, a man in a blazer was taking notes. He wasn't writing about takeoff speed or cabin cleanliness. He was typing one sentence. Crew member used status discrimination against unidentified passenger in seat 3A. He knew exactly who the man in 3A was. He was briefed before Keanu even booked the ticket. On board, Keanu leaned back. He closed his eyes but didn't sleep. His mind wandered back to something his mother once told him when he was a teenager. When people think you're small, you have the biggest chance to surprise them. The flight was smooth. The food was bland. A baby cried 3 rows back. And every so often Melissa walked by and shot Keanu a glance. Not a kind one. Near the end of the flight, she came by with the snack cart. She handed peanuts to the man, in 3B, then paused at Keanu. "You want something?" she asked. He smiled. "I'm good, thank you." She smirked and rolled her eyes before moving on. The woman in 4A leaned forward. She was in her 50s with kind eyes and silver hair tied into a bun. She tapped Keanu's shoulder. "Excuse me," she whispered. "I hope you don't mind me saying, but that was rude." Keanu nodded. It was, but sometimes letting people reveal themselves is more powerful than responding. The woman smiled. "You look familiar. Are you?" Keanu held a finger gently to his lips. "Just a quiet traveler." The woman smiled wider and nodded. When the plane landed, the usual rush of people trying to stand before the seatbelt sign turned off happened. Keanu stayed seated. He let everyone rush by. He even waited until Melissa was helping an elderly man down the aisle before standing up. He walked off calmly. No confrontation, no show. Just a man leaving a flight. But what happened after he left would make headlines in less than a week. The airline's internal team received an urgent report flagged with a red label. Attached was footage from the flight. It had been recorded by an anonymous passenger and sent to the oversight group Keanu had been working with for 9 months. The footage showed how Melissa spoke to Keanu. Her expressions, her tone, her dismissiveness. It also showed Keanu's composure. How he never raised his voice. How he never asked for anything more than a simple connection. The executives watched the footage in silence. One of them, a tall man in a gray suit, closed the laptop and said, "Do you realize who that was?" The room fell still. That was Keanu Reeves. And this wasn't just a flight. Within days, the airline received a letter. Not from Keanu, but from an aviation investor group. The letter cited, "Operational values not in alignment with our shared vision of respect, service, and dignity." Attached to the letter was an official request. Termination of partnership and revocation of private aviation licensing under our brand alliance. The airline had 30 days to respond. But by then, the public would know. The footage would leak, and the quiet man in seat 3A, the one they tried to belittle over Wi-Fi, would remind the world why real power doesn't need to shout. Whispers in the boardroom. The early morning sun poured through tall glass windows of a quiet office building in Los Angeles. The room was sterile, modern, and silent except for the ticking of a chrome wall clock. 3 men and 2 women sat around a long conference table, each with a tablet or laptop in front of them. The mood was tense. Not the kind of tension caused by gossip or regular business troubles, but the type that builds when someone knows they're being watched. On the center screen of the room, paused at minute 13:08, was the blurry still of Keanu Reeves sitting calmly in seat 3A. He didn't argue. One executive whispered, almost confused. He didn't raise his voice, didn't ask for compensation, didn't even report her. The woman across from him shook her head. That's what makes it worse. It's undeniable. This wasn't staged. It's the pure truth of how we treat people when we think they're nobody. Another man, bald, firm-faced, and in charge of operations, leaned back in his chair. "And now we've got 30 days before that investor group revokes our license. And once they pull out, we lose access to 4 airports and nearly half our premium traffic." He clicked a button and played the footage again. There it was. Melissa's tone, her condescension, her smug expressions. It was all on camera. And there was Keanu's calm voice, his measured replies, his patience. Not once did he mention who he was. Not once did he seek pity. He just took it. The woman from Human Resources leaned forward. "We can release a public apology. Maybe suspend the crew." The bald man shook his head. "It's too late. It's already in motion. The Reeves initiative is being discussed in investor forums. They're calling it the silent review, and they're quoting his exact words from the flight. Sometimes letting people reveal themselves is more powerful than responding. That's going viral." They all went quiet. Thousands of feet below, in the city streets, the world moved on unaware. People walked, drove, texted, ordered coffee. But inside another office in a different part of the city, one man stood by a window sipping tea. His long black hair brushed the side of his face. He wore a black t-shirt and jeans. He wasn't in a rush. He rarely was. Keanu Reeves had said very little since the flight. He didn't post anything. He didn't tell his team to go after the airline. He didn't hire lawyers or do interviews. Instead, he sent a single message to one of the oversight executives from the investor group. The way someone treats a stranger when no one's watching is their real resume. The reply came back minutes later. We understand. It's already being handled. Keanu's silence was louder than most people's outrage. Meanwhile, inside the airline's employee break room, Melissa sat with a coffee in hand. Her coworker Jeff scrolled on his phone. You seen this? He asked, showing her the screen. Melissa blinked at the headline. Mystery passenger was Keanu Reeves. Airline faces license crisis after Wi-Fi dispute. She snorted. No way that was him. That guy looked like he hadn't shaved in a week. Jeff looked nervous. Yeah, well, it was. He's part of that private oversight group now. The one that can influence regional license access. Melissa rolled her eyes. So what? He didn't even say anything. How was I supposed to know? Jeff frowned. Maybe you didn't have to know. Maybe you just had to be decent. Her face tightened, but it wasn't just about her anymore. Within 24 hours, the airline's social media team was swamped. Thousands of comments flooded in under their posts. Not angry comments from usual trolls. These were different. Thoughtful, calm, disappointed. They quoted Keanu. They spoke about dignity. They posted screenshots of the video. Hashtags like #3, Seatlesson, and Reeves report were trending. By the third day, mainstream media picked it up. News anchors ran the clip. Articles poured in. And all of them focused on one thing: how someone as famous and powerful as Keanu Reeves didn't use his fame to fight back, and how his silence revealed more than a press conference ever could. And while the world discussed him, Keanu stayed out of sight. He didn't want fame. He didn't want revenge. He wanted a change in behavior, something real, not just surface level. Back in his quiet studio, Keanu walked to a wooden table near the window. He laid out a folder. Inside it were letters, handwritten ones. They weren't from lawyers or partners. They were from flight attendants, pilots, and even passengers from other airlines. They'd heard what happened and wanted to say something. One note read, I was trained to put status over service. I'm ashamed of it now. Thank you for reminding us what matters. Another read, we never knew kindness could trend. Thank you for not shouting. And another, from a young girl, my mom's a flight attendant. She showed me your story and cried. She said you taught her to slow down and be gentle again. Keanu folded the letters neatly and placed them back in the folder. He walked outside, where a boy about 10 years old waited on a bench with his father. The boy spotted Keanu and smiled shyly. Are you really John Wick? The boy asked. Keanu knelt down and smiled. Only when the camera's on. In real life, I'm just Keanu. The boy held out a toy plane. Can you sign this? Keanu took it, smiled, and scribbled something in small letters on the wing. The boy looked down at the message. It didn't say John Wick. It said, always treat others like they matter. The boy's father whispered, thank you for everything. Keanu nodded, stood, and walked back inside. Meanwhile, at the airline's headquarters, a new email hit every employee inbox. Subject, mandatory training updated EAR team. Due to recent events and a new oversight requirement, all employees must attend a values-first service training session. Our culture must change. This is non-negotiable. And under it, in bold, our new motto, character is how you treat those who can't give you anything. The irony? That line came straight from Keanu's quiet, handwritten journal, something no one had read except a few trusted friends. Somehow it had found its way into boardrooms, onto employee walls, and even into classroom slides at a pilot school. One man, one flight, no raised voice, and still, the world changed. The letter that shook the skies. 3 days after the training email was sent, something unusual happened in the skies over the United States. One of the regional flights owned by the same airline that had dismissed Keanu with a smirk and denied him Wi-Fi was quietly grounded mid-journey at an unexpected airport. No emergency was declared. No technical problem had occurred. But a coded directive had been issued, one that only top-level staff could interpret. The captain received the notification and calmly announced, "Ladies and gentlemen, due to operational reasons, we will be making an early stop. Thank you for your understanding." Most passengers were confused, some grumbled. Others didn't care as long as they still made it to their destination. What none of them knew was that this one flight would become part of a massive audit, an investigation that would uncover years of arrogance, misplaced priorities, and deep neglect hidden under polished logos and rehearsed smiles. This wasn't just about Keanu anymore. He had triggered something bigger. Back in a quiet studio with shelves filled with books, candles, and old movie posters, Keanu sat beside a small desk. The desk wasn't fancy. It was handmade by a local carpenter, gifted to him after Keanu donated money for his daughter's surgery. On the desk lay a letter he had written, his only direct response to the entire ordeal. It wasn't addressed to the airline. It wasn't addressed to the media. It was a letter to service workers around the world, to those who greet us, serve us, guide us, and sometimes ignore us. I see you. I know it's hard. I know you deal with pressure, unkind words, and impossible standards, but remember this. Every moment with someone is a chance to be a small hero. And in the quiet times when you think no one notices your kindness, someone always does. Never underestimate what dignity can do. Thank you, Keanu. His manager had read it and asked, "Do you want this published?" Keanu replied, "No, just sent, not posted, just mailed." And so it was mailed. Thousands of copies, not in bulk, not through media blasts. Instead, envelopes were hand-sealed and sent to airline staff, restaurant workers, drivers, clerks, and hotel staff, all people who had written to Keanu first. The letter wasn't flashy, just typed on plain white paper with a small note on the bottom, "You matter, even when they pretend you don't." Word spread. Across the country, service staff began taping the letter on lockers, office boards, and even break room refrigerators. Photos popped up online. People were crying, not because a celebrity had written to them, but because someone had acknowledged their unseen effort. Someone powerful had remembered them. Meanwhile, inside the same airline's legal department, chaos brewed. A team of lawyers sat around a table piled with documents. The senior counsel, a woman named Diane, flipped through a red folder marked priority. She rubbed her temples and said, "We have to respond by next Friday. If we don't, they're moving to revoke our access to 5 primary airports." Someone across the room said, "Can we fight it?" Another replied, "Not when the entire public sees us as the villain. We need a human response, not a legal one." Someone else added, "He didn't even go to the press. We did this to ourselves." They fell silent. In a room on the floor below, Melissa was called in for a private meeting. She walked in with her usual calm face, but it cracked slightly when she saw the Director of Human Resources and the Vice President of Operations waiting. "Melissa," the VP said, "this isn't just about one flight anymore. We've had 24 internal reports about similar behavior in the past. The only difference now is everyone saw this one." Melissa stayed quiet. "We're terminating your contract," the HR director added gently. "And we suggest you take time to reflect. This isn't punishment, it's correction." Melissa swallowed hard. She wanted to argue, to defend herself. But deep down, she knew it wasn't just about Keanu. It was about the years she spent judging passengers based on clothes, bookings, accents, or silence. And now silence had answered her back, louder than any shout could. The press caught on to the shift. A news outlet ran a piece titled, "Keanu Reeves Changes Airline Culture with One Calm Flight." Another said, "The Quiet Revolution, How Humility Just Grounded an Empire." Podcasts debated the story, focusing not on fame but on the values behind it. Influencers called it a lesson in kindness. And on one particular morning show, a young former flight attendant named James told his story. I saw the clip, and it reminded me of something Keanu once said in an old interview. He said, "Sometimes the most powerful thing you can be is gentle." We forget that. We're trained to upsell, to rank people. But this reminded me that everyone deserves basic respect. Even airlines not involved in the scandal started quietly changing their protocols. Training manuals were updated. Customer service scripts became less robotic. A ripple had begun, and yet through it all, Keanu remained quiet. He didn't accept interviews. He didn't write a book. He didn't start a new campaign. He just continued with his quiet work, supporting small causes, helping people silently, and walking through life like a man who had nothing to prove. But one evening, something unexpected happened. Keanu received a package. It was small and wrapped in brown paper. There was no return address. Inside, a handwritten note. "I was wrong. I let power go to my head. You didn't humiliate me. You taught me. Thank you. Melissa." Beneath it, a tiny pin. The kind flight attendants wear. But scratched into the metal on the back were the words, "I'm starting over." Keanu held the note in his hand for a long time. He placed it in a drawer next to the others. That same night, a young trainee flight attendant named Theo boarded his first shift. Nervous, excited, but also afraid of making mistakes. He had memorized everything from the manual. But just before boarding, his supervisor handed him a note, one that had been printed and passed down between newer staff. It read, "In case you forget why you started, just remember the man in seat 3A. He never asked for anything, but he gave us everything back." And so, the sky carried more than just passengers now. It carried stories. It carried quiet changes. It carried the legacy of a single moment, when someone tried to deny a man we fee, not knowing he was about to change how the world saw service forever. The man behind the curtain. It was a cold morning in Vancouver, and fog rolled slowly across the glass windows of a quiet building tucked between the hills. The building looked like any other office from the outside, but inside, it was the headquarters of one of the most discreet aviation oversight firms in the world. They weren't well known to the public, but major airlines knew them well, and feared them even more. Inside a corner office, a man named Elliot bent over a stack of reports. He wasn't a flashy person. His shirts were always tucked too neatly, his hair never out of place, and his voice barely rose above a whisper. But behind that calm look was a man who had spent his entire life studying patterns, especially how people in service roles treated those they thought didn't matter. He picked up a file labeled Incident, Flight 2739, Passenger, Keanu Reeves. Elliot had known Keanu for years, not through Hollywood, not through fame, but through something far more personal. 10 years ago, Elliot's younger sister, Marie, had worked as a janitor at a film festival. She'd been humiliated by a group of producers after accidentally walking into the wrong room. The only person who had stood up for her was Keanu. He had walked her out, offered her a quiet meal, and left her with one sentence: "Don't let people steal your light just because theirs has gone out." Elliot had never forgotten that, and now, 10 years later, he held in his hands a report detailing how the same man was treated like an outsider on a flight, simply because he hadn't demanded respect. Elliot stood up, took the file, and walked into the main briefing room. The room was filled with specialists, some from aviation, others from psychology, ethics, even behavioral science. This was not just a committee. This was a team built to monitor integrity at 35,000 feet. "We're not just dealing with poor service," Elliot began, laying the file on the table. "We're looking at an attitude problem embedded into the industry. And this case, this moment, is the best teaching tool we've ever seen." He tapped the cover. "This is not about punishing an airline. It's about rebuilding trust." He looked around at the room. "We're moving to expand our program. Every airline that wants access to our airport network will now need to go through a human dignity audit. And it starts with this case, with seat 3A. A young woman in the back raised her hand. "Should we ask Keanu to participate?" Elliot shook his head. "No, he's already done more by doing less." Meanwhile, across town, Keanu walked into a small coffee shop wearing a black beanie and hoodie. No security. No flash. Just quiet steps and a soft smile. The barista looked up and froze for a moment. Hi. Are you? Keanu smiled. Just someone who loves espresso. The barista laughed nervously and made his drink. As Keanu took a sip, a boy about 12 years old walked up shyly. Mr. Reeves? Yes? The boy pulled out a wrinkled paper from his pocket. It was an old news article printed out on a school printer. My teacher showed us this, the one where you didn't say anything when they were rude to you. How did you stay so calm? Keanu looked down at the paper, then at the boy. Because people aren't their worst moments, he said. They're their next ones. The boy nodded slowly. Thanks. I think I want to be like you when I grow up. Keanu smiled. Then you already are. Back at the airline headquarters, a storm brewed beneath the calm exterior. The company's senior vice president of customer relations, Martin Cole, paced back and forth in a glass-walled office. His tie was loose and his phone buzzed nonstop. Another investor had just pulled funding. Another airport threatened to cut ties. He slammed his phone down and yelled, "We're losing control of the story." His assistant, a quiet young woman named Layla, said gently, "Maybe that's because it's not our story anymore." He glared at her. "What's that supposed to mean?" Layla took a deep breath. She had once seen Keanu speak at a charity event and remembered every word he said. "People don't trust brands anymore," she said. "They trust values. And our brand, our name, isn't saying anything. We're just defending, reacting, spinning." But he never even spoke. And he won. Martin didn't reply. Layla continued, "Maybe we should stop trying to fix our image. Maybe we should fix our soul." That night, Martin couldn't sleep. Not because of the numbers, not because of the media, but because of a dream he had. In it, he was a passenger in seat 3B. Next to him sat Keanu, quiet and patient. And in the dream, he watched himself mock the man beside him, not knowing who he was. And then he watched the plane go dark. Not crash, not fall, but lose all light. He woke up sweating. The next morning, Martin called a press conference. Reporters gathered in a clean, overly lit room. They expected the usual: denials, corporate language, maybe a scripted apology. But Martin surprised everyone. He stepped up to the podium, looked straight into the cameras, and said, "We failed. Not just in our service, but in our character. This is not about a celebrity. This is about a culture that forgot humility. We are now launching a Respect First program, effective immediately. And we thank the man in seat 3A for reminding us who we are supposed to be." He stepped back, no questions, no spinning. It was the most watched airline press conference of the year. Keanu saw the clip later that night. He was sitting on a quiet bench in a park, feeding birds. His phone buzzed. He watched it silently, then smiled and whispered, "Good." As he stood up, a voice called out, "Excuse me, sir. Are you Keanu Reeves?" A woman in uniform stood there holding her daughter's hand. "Yes," he replied gently. "I'm a pilot," she said. "I just wanted to thank you. I got a letter, the one about dignity. It reminded me why I started flying in the first place." Keanu shook her hand. "Thank you for flying people safely." And with that, he walked away, not to applause, not to fame, just as a man who chose to be kind when he had every right to be angry. And because of that, the world listened. Echoes in the sky news traveled fast, but transformation traveled slow. While social media had moved on to the next trending topic, something deeper had started growing, something that couldn't be measured in clicks or shares. The industry itself was changing. One quiet act at a time flight crews began opening staff meetings with a new pledge. Every seat has a story. Every passenger matters. Airports introduced a new training module based on what had happened with Keanu. They called it Project 3A. It focused not on customer service mechanics, but emotional awareness. How to listen, How to see beyond uniforms, ticket classes, and last names. But the most powerful shift wasn't happening in offices or boardrooms. It was happening mid-air, on a flight from Denver to Chicago. A tired mother holding 2 children struggled to fit their bags in the overhead compartment. Instead of walking past, a young flight attendant named Theo stepped forward and said gently, "May I help you?" He didn't just lift the bags. He made sure she was seated with her kids, offered them water, and even helped calm the youngest child with a smile. The mother whispered, "Thank you." Theo smiled and replied, "Seat 3A changed everything for us." She didn't understand it at first, but when she later looked it up, she cried. Meanwhile, in a quiet cabin far from the rush of media, Keanu sat in a chair beside an old friend, a retired flight attendant named Samira. She had been diagnosed with an illness that kept her from flying. Her apartment was small but filled with love. Keanu brought her groceries, flowers, and a copy of a handwritten letter someone had sent to him. Samira read it aloud. "Dear Mr. Reeves, I was once the person who judged too quickly, but after your story, I saw myself in the mirror and didn't like what I saw. So I started over. I treat everyone like Seat 3A now. And you didn't say a single angry word. Thank you." Jasmine, gate agent, Atlanta. Samira looked at him with tears in her eyes. "You never told anyone it was a test, did you?" Keanu shook his head. "Because it wasn't supposed to be. I just flew like everyone else." Samira smiled. "But you're not like everyone else." Keanu looked down at his hands. "I am. I just try to stay quiet when it's easier to yell." She leaned forward. "That's why the world listens when you speak." Outside, the wind rustled the leaves of the small tree near her balcony. Inside, the silence was full of meaning. But not everyone was happy with the shift. A former executive from the airline that lost its license held a private dinner with other frustrated businessmen. He didn't even sue, one of them said bitterly. He just watched, and now we're the ones who look like villains. The executive clenched his jaw. They turned him into a symbol. Another man chuckled. You don't fight symbols. You learn from them, or you get erased. Back at the oversight headquarters, Elliot reviewed a report that made him pause. One of the most powerful airline conglomerates had reached out. They wanted to adopt the 3A model, not just for show, but permanently. They wanted to embed human dignity into every part of their system. From check-in to landing, he smiled. It's spreading. In another part of the country, a school teacher named Rachel showed her students the now famous flight clip during a life lesson class. What do you see? She asked. A girl raised her hand. Someone being mean. Another said, someone being calm even when it hurts. A boy whispered, a hero who didn't need to fight to win. Rachel nodded. And what did we learn from this? The class went quiet until the same boy said that you don't have to be loud to be powerful. As they discussed it, Rachel looked out the window and smiled to herself. She had once served coffee on a plane too, before teaching, and she remembered all the times passengers had dismissed her, shouted, or rolled their eyes. But she also remembered one man who smiled and said thank you, and left a note on a napkin that read, You matter more than you know. She never forgot it, and now she was teaching it. On a late evening walk through downtown, Keanu passed by a bookstore. In the front window was a sign. We treat every customer like they're in seat 3A. He smiled. Inside, a young cashier noticed him and rushed out holding a small paperback. Mr. Reeves, this is for you. Keanu took the book. It was called Dignity in Silence, How One Man Reminded Us to Care. He opened it to the dedication page. It read, For those who are quiet, kind, and patient, thank you for teaching us to be better. Keanu looked at the cashier. Did you write this? The cashier nodded nervously. I was on that flight, row 6, I saw everything. I never said anything. And I regret it. But then I realized I could still speak. With this, Keanu handed him a card. If you ever want to work on something bigger, I know people who'd love your voice. As he walked away, the cashier stood frozen. Not because he had met a celebrity, but because the man in seat 3A had just invited him to change the world again. And as more airlines adopted the model, and more passengers shared their experiences, one thing became clear. Kindness wasn't a trend. It was a revolution, and it had taken off at 35,000 feet. The final boarding call. 2 years had passed since the flight that started it all. The moment felt like a memory now, a small ripple in the past. But the impact had only grown stronger. Airports now displayed small plaques that read, "Honor Seat 3A, where dignity began." It wasn't about a seat, or even a person. It was a reminder that the skies didn't belong to arrogance. They belonged to humanity. Across different cities, people now talked about the 3A rule like it had always existed. Gate agents greeted everyone with equal respect, no matter their outfit, accent, or class. Flight attendants took extra moments to offer care without being asked. Passengers spoke up, not to complain but to uplift, because when one person chooses silence over anger, the world pays attention. And because one man had done nothing, everything had changed. In Los Angeles, a new airline launched. Its logo was a pair of open wings shaped like cupped hands. The slogan beneath it read, "Fly with dignity." The founder, Elliot, the oversight director, and his first hire, Jasmine, the former gate agent who wrote the apology letter. Meanwhile, Keanu kept living simply. He still walked, still helped strangers, still paid for meals anonymously, still sat on benches feeding birds. But on one crisp autumn morning, he received an invitation. "You are cordially invited to the unveiling of the International Seat 3A Memorial Terminal, in honor of a journey that reminded us to listen, to see, and to be human." The ceremony was set for a bright Saturday, and thousands came: pilots, passengers, service workers, students, leaders. Even Melissa, the former stewardess, attended, wearing a simple blue dress and holding a small flower. No cameras, no stage speeches, just quiet stories told among strangers. Young girl read a poem she wrote. A former military veteran shared how he was finally treated with respect because of a new policy inspired by the story. An elderly couple explained how their disabled son was finally offered comfort and help, not pity. And then Keanu stood up, not to be a star, but to be part of the story. He stepped onto a small wooden platform, looked around and said, "I didn't expect any of this. I wasn't trying to start a movement. I just stayed quiet because I believe we reveal more in stillness. I believe people can be better when we choose kindness over control." He paused. "But this isn't about me. It's about you. All of you who decided that being kind doesn't cost power. It gives it." He looked over at Melissa. She met his gaze, her eyes full of quiet sorrow but also hope. He nodded to her. A silent forgiveness. Then he stepped down, and the crowd stood in applause, not loud, not wild, just steady and full of heart. Outside the terminal, an artist was painting a mural on a long white wall. It showed an airplane flying across a sky, filled with written notes, open hands, and a shining seat labeled 3A. But in the corner of the mural was the most powerful image of all: Keanu seated by the window, gazing out at clouds with peace in his eyes. A small boy walked by with his mother and pointed. "Who is that, Mama?" His mother knelt and whispered, "That's the man who didn't yell back." The boy blinked. "Why?" "Because," she said, brushing his hair, "he knew silence could shake mountains." As the sun set over the airport, planes took off, one by one, cutting through the clouds with grace, each filled with people from all walks of life, each carrying hearts that now remembered every person matters, every story matters, and sometimes the greatest heroes never say a word.